Republican nomination after sweeping all 5 races last night in the battle for the East and the Mid-Atlantic. And tonight, the Republican candidates are descending on the state of Indiana, where 57 very important delegates are now up for grabs on the GOP side. Donald Trump was in the Hoosier State earlier today campaigning with legendary basketball coach, the one and only Bobby Knight. Take a look.
You know, normally they come out, they introduce Trump. Here, I'm coming out, and I'm going to introduce Bobby Knight, okay?
And they talk about, you know, he isn't presidential. I don't know what the hell that means. I think the most important thing in the world is that we vote for the best man there is for this job, and you've already met him.
We had a big night last night. We had five. Oh, we're going to build that wall, and you know who's going to pay for that wall?
And earlier today, Senator Ted Cruz made a big announcement announcing that Carly Fiorina would be his choice for vice president if he should win the nomination. Watch this.
Carly is a vice presidential nominee who I believe is superbly skilled, superbly gifted at helping unite this party, bring us together so we stand united as one.
This fight is about far more than a ticket. This fight is about far more than Ted Cruz and Carly Fiorina. This is a fight for all of us. For our party, for our future, for our children's future.
Here now with reaction, the author of the New York Times bestseller Duplicity, former Speaker of the House, Fox News contributor Newt Gingrich. Mr. Speaker, good to see you. Big day today.
It's good to see you. Well, it is a big day, and actually, I'm talking to you from Purdue, where I'm also involved in giving a talk and seeing what's happening in Indiana.
All right, well, let's talk about Indiana. Let's start with Ted Cruz's announcement. Carly Fiorina. I thought Carly, by the way, was a great candidate. She aggressively was able to prosecute the case against Hillary Clinton, I think stronger than some of her male counterparts. Does this help Ted Cruz?
Oh, I think at the margin it might help him. Carly Fiorina is a very smart person. She understands technology and the evolution of the modern world probably as well as anybody running for president in either party. I thought she was very effective on the debate stage. You know, and this is a little bit parallel to what Ronald Reagan tried in 1976 when he was trailing Gerald Ford, and so he announced his vice presidential choice. Didn't happen to work, but it was, again, throwing a Hail Mary pass at the last moment of the game. I think Cruz, by doing this, is a little daring. You know, if you lose 5 states, to come back the next day and announce your vice presidential nominee may not be the best timing. But you can understand why he's got to shake the game up. And this was a serious effort to try to shake up the game, because if it keeps going the way it is now, he will lose and Trump will be the nominee.
Let's talk about Donald Trump's reaction in a town hall earlier today with our colleague and friend Greta Van Susteren. He was asked about this move by Ted Cruz. Here's what he said.
Well, I think it's really a waste of time, honestly. I think that it should be over. If Indiana treats us right, we're going to make America great again. We're going to get rid of these politicians, and we're going to do the right job. I just think it's so early in the process. You have to first get the nomination. Here's a guy picking a vice presidential candidate. He has 0 chance. He has no path. It's sort of crazy. So I think it's, well, it gets him in the news cycle because he's been totally taken out. You know, he had a horrible day yesterday, and he came in third, meaning 3rd out of 3 most of the time. Most of the, I guess 4 out of 5, he was 3rd. And he picked up no delegates. And, you know, you're talking about major states like Pennsylvania, like Maryland. I mean, we're talking about big stuff. And Connecticut. He came in, he got nothing. And I think he wanted to do something to get out of that negative cycle. And in that sense, it was probably good for him, but people will not like it.
Now, the Trump delegate count is at 950. Let me ask you this question. But it also seems, remember, he won 17 bound delegates in Pennsylvania, but there were 54 unbound delegates. My analysis today gets him at least 40 more of the 54 available. So it brings him very close to 1,000. Is that now unbeatable, in your opinion?
Well, I don't know that it's totally unbeatable. Again, everybody's allowed to play out the game, whether it's basketball and you're in the last seconds of the fourth quarter, or it's football and you're right down to the end of the game. You still get to play. And the team that's behind still gets its at-bat in the ninth inning. But the fact is, Trump is way ahead. Probably better than a 90% likelihood he's going to be the nominee now. And I think you find that there are people who analyze this every single day who are reaching a conclusion. He overperformed yesterday. He got at least 40 more delegates than he needed to be on track to get the nomination. If he wins Indiana, it is for all practical purposes over because at that point you've closed out anybody else being able to stop him. And I think even if he only gets a third of the delegates in Indiana, he is still on track to get the nomination.
Yeah. Let's talk about, so many people have said they want to see Donald Trump a little more presidential. He gave a foreign policy speech today. Serious, significant speech. Here's part of it. Get your reaction.
And then there's ISIS. I have a simple message for them. Their days are numbered. I won't tell them where, and I won't tell them how. We have to be unpredictable. And we have to be unpredictable starting now. But they're going to be gone. ISIS will be gone if I'm elected president, and they'll be gone quickly. They will be gone very, very quickly.
He also talked about China. He talked about Russia. He talked about radical Islam. He talked about building up our nation's military, taking care of our veterans. It was long. It was substantive. A relationship with Israel and other countries. What were your thoughts on it?
Well, I read the speech on the way out here, and I saw part of it at the airport waiting for the plane. And first of all, I thought on television, he looked presidential, he looked serious, he looked controlled, and overall I thought it was a good presentation. The speech itself is a very serious speech, and I think you're going to find it ridiculed by some of the Washington establishment, in part because it challenges so many of their assumptions. But I think his challenges are pretty useful. He has a very bold view of Russia and China, something which will startle all of the traditional, anti-Russian, anti-Chinese mantra. But what he's saying is pretty straightforward, which is the first stage ought to be, is there a way to get to a relationship that is friendlier rather than more hostile? Now, that's kind of the opposite of what people would have expected him to say a year ago, and tells you that he's been thinking about the U.S.'s role in the world, and how do you end this cycle now running for 15 years of us losing young men and women in wars that don't get won, don't accomplish anything, and leave us, frankly, a weaker country and a country that's mired down in a number of places. And I think he's trying to wrestle with that.
It's a very complicated issue. It's frustrating to me when 5,000 Americans get killed, Iraq, Afghanistan, many thousands more injured. They win Mosul, Fallujah, Ramadi, and Tikrit, and then we give back the land, and then ISIS takes it over. Or 58,000 people in Vietnam are killed, and then we pull out because all of these wars then get argued through the prism of Washington politics. We don't fight these wars to win them anymore. I don't think we can risk American treasure and lose that treasure going forward any further. Do you?
Well, a large part of what Trump said on that topic is exactly what Reagan said in 81, 82. What was called at that time the Weinberger Doctrine, which is you don't go to war unless you're going to win. If you do go to war, you go to war with overwhelming force. He's clearly sending a very clear signal. He's going to rebuild the American military, which it desperately needs. His report on the decline in the size of the military, the size of the Navy, the size of the Air Force, how old some of our equipment is, all those things are, I think, very, very solid. And I think that you're going to see somebody here who wants to, this is complicated for the news media and for the Washington elites to understand. He wants to rebuild American strength to minimize the need to use it, on the grounds that if you're overwhelmingly powerful, people don't come and play with you.
That's the
Reagan
Reagan
doctrine. They recognize
doctrine.
you're going to win.
Yeah.
That's the Reagan doctrine.
We'll come back. We'll continue more with Newt Gingrich right after the break. Also coming up, Donald Trump surpasses Mitt Romney's vote total from Hannity. So Republican voters, they're energized this election cycle, and it's led in part by frontrunner Donald Trump. Here now to explain a lot more is Fox and Friends' own Heather Nauert. Heather, what do you got?
Hi there, Sean. Well, Donald Trump has been saying that he is millions of votes ahead of his Republican rivals, and in the numbers, well, they prove that he is right. After sweeping all 5 primary races last night, Trump has now accumulated more than 10.1 million total votes. That's 3 million more votes than his top challenger, Senator Ted Cruz, who has 6.9 million votes. Trump has 6 million more than Governor John Kasich, who racked up almost 3.7 million votes. And if you look at the total, 2016 Republican contest won, Trump has a big advantage with 27 victories compared to Cruz's 11 and Kasich's 1. That was his home state of Ohio. And then there is this interesting figure, Sean. If we look at this from a historical perspective, Trump is on pace to set the Republican record for total votes won. He's already surpassed Mitt Romney's 2012 primary and caucus total of 9.8 million votes. And there are still 10 races to go, including California. And of course, that one is massive. Sean, we'll keep a close eye on the story and get back to you.
All right, Heather, thanks so much. Appreciate it. Back with reaction to that is former Speaker of the House, Fox News contributor Newt Gingrich. That is a pretty amazing figure. Now, if you add to that, so 2016 GOP turnout up 60%, Democratic turnout depressed down 20 to 30%. You've got to interpret that, if you're a Republican, that there's a wide open field for them to win a general election. But Hillary often outperforms in these hypothetical matchups. Why?
Well, I mean, first of all, I think in the short run, the country's had, a long time, 24 years, to get used to Hillary Clinton. She has a base in the Democratic Party that's very stable. They're going to vote for her under almost any circumstance. And Trump is still both largely unknown and largely shaped by the news media. So if you're an independent or a weak Democrat, but you haven't been part of the Republican primary process, all of your understanding of Trump is mediated through the news media, who are not exactly his friends. The question is, if you look at exactly what you just said, here's a guy who is bringing lots of new people into the party. He's bringing people in who are switching, by the way, from Democrat to Republican to vote in the Republican primary. We have every evidence that there's a continued increase in interest in what he's doing. And I'm always amazed at all these folks who have been consistently wrong for a year. At every stage for a year, they've underestimated Trump. They now tell us about the general election. My advice is he will run a different general election than any of us can imagine, just as he has run a different primary than any of us could have imagined. And I'd sort of wait to see how Trump solves these problems before I'd assume that folks who don't have a clue are the right ones to tell us what's going to happen.
You actually made a lot of news last night when you were on the program, and you said, get over it, as it relates to the establishment. A couple of stories out there that I actually found this pretty funny, and this was in the Washington Examiner. Some House conservatives are warning Trump to keep their promises. Well, isn't that one of the problems we've had, is that House Republicans did not keep their promises? They've shown no willingness to fight President Obama and stop his agenda, use the power of the purse, or repeal the parts of Obamacare they could, or stop executive amnesty. Didn't they kind of cause that themselves? Who are they to lecture?
Well, look, I think, again, there are factions in the House Republican Party who have different approaches to these things. Certainly the Freedom Caucus sees itself as a very hardline group. But I think what will be a surprise to everybody is that Trump wants to get things done and wants to move towards making Washington governable again. And I suspect he's going to actually be a pretty reliable partner with Paul Ryan in trying to think through, what can we do to get back to a balanced budget? What can we do to protect America's interests? How do we rebuild the American military? A point he said in passing today, how do we fix the Veterans Administration, which is a corrupt disaster? I think he's going to be very aggressive about moving on these kind of issues, and I think you'll find a large part of the House Republican Party very eager to work with him, and frankly, a good number of senators will find that they have things they can do with Trump that they may not have expected.
I want to talk strategically, tactically. Whoever the nominee is, in the case of Trump, he made the statement that he's ready to hit the Hillary scandal encyclopedia, Crooked Hillary. Is that the best strategy?
Well, I think it's an inevitable strategy because they're between the Clinton Foundation, the Clinton interest groups, the various businesses and governments that have tried to manipulate the State Department, her total failure to use her emails in a professional way, fitting national security. I mean, there's so much, you know, think of Hillary as sort of this mound of scandals of various kinds. You can hardly ignore them. But I think there's a bigger issue. Hillary is the personification of the bureaucratic welfare state that has failed. My hope is that Trump is going to decide to take the same aggressiveness, the same boldness, the same energy that he's used in the Republican primary and go into places like Southside Chicago, go into Baltimore, go into places where you can draw a real contrast and ask people, do you really want to keep the same failures in charge, ruining your lives, ruining your neighborhoods, crippling your children's future, or are you ready to try something really different? I think if Trump has got the nerve to do that, it could be an extraordinary election this fall.
Let's talk a little bit about Terry McAuliffe. Speaking of corruption, I mean, he announced that he's restoring the voting rights of 206,000 felons, including violent felons, in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Now, this is a purple state, a swing state, an important state. Is this to help Hillary?
Well, you have to assume it is, but, you know, the key question in Virginia is a constitutional one. The governor clearly has the power to commute individual sentences. There's really serious legal question whether he can commute 206,000 as a block. And I think that's something that has to be looked at very seriously. And as you point out, to say that everybody who has been a convicted felon will now automatically have their rights back, including some people who've committed the kind of crimes that, frankly, might have led to a lifetime sentence of various kinds, I think you got to look at it more carefully. Now, to be honest, 37 states have followed the notion that once you've served your time, you get the right to vote again. So there has been a long movement towards trying to reintegrate people back into society if they paid for the crime and if their sentence is over. But the way McAuliffe did it was classically Terry McAuliffe. It was crude, it was one-sided, it was a surprise. And it makes him look fairly dumb, frankly.
We've had the never Trump, never Cruz movement. Cruz supporters don't like Trump supporters don't like Cruz supporters. Governor Rick Scott of Florida weighed in, and he is saying he's calling on the Stop Trump movement to disband. Do you worry about unity in a general election?
Sure. I mean, first of all, we ought to have a Never Hillary movement.
That's what I said.
Remind everybody in the other movements they ought to join the Never Hillary movement. Second, and this will be interesting to watch, Trump now describes himself as the presumptive nominee. Fine. That means the burden is on him to unify the party now. The burden isn't on the losers. The burden's on the winner. And he had better figure out a strategy between now and Cleveland to bring these folks back in, because he will have beaten them. He will be standing astride the party. But in order to make sure that a third of the party doesn't walk out, he's going to have to figure out how to accommodate them. That will be an interesting test of the art of the deal.
All right. Wow. Well said. Former Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich, thanks for being with us.